Welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany and I didn't film an intro. So you're getting the B-roll first. Now we're going straight to the haul. Hope that's okay with you. I'm really excited to share with you the books that I found. I ended up finding around 30 books that needed to come home with me. They begged and I said, well, okay, if you must, you must. It's kind of a range of genres, a little bit. I'm mostly middle grade and classics, which is not abnormal at all because my daughter was with me, as you saw, and so she had quite a few middle grades that she wanted and then some that I picked up also. But then I have a little bit of fantasy and a little bit of historical fiction as well. So the one adult fantasy that I got, which is also a fairy tale retelling, is The Snow Child, and this is one that I've wanted to read for a really long time. It feels like really atmospheric for wintertime. I've heard some mixed things, but it was 75 cents. And so I really wanted to get it. My library does not have it. So I was really excited to find it and give it a try. I'll probably read it this winter sometime. The other fantasy thing that I've got, I've seen it sometimes as middle grade, but this was shelved in the YA section and I've seen it as YA too, so I'm not really sure which one it is. But I got this Garth Nix boxed set. I think it's called the Aporson trilogy, and it has Sabriel, Lyriel, and Aporson in it. And so I was really excited to find this. My friend Dia from Novel Idea has recommended this to me, and I've heard a lot of other people say that it's really wonderful as well, and a really good fantasy. So I was really excited to find this because it's essentially brand new. Let's move on to some historical fiction. So I had to look this first one up because I picked it up because it was only 90 cents. And so I wasn't sure if it was a nonfiction or if it was a fiction, and it's August 1914 by Alexander, I'm so bad at pronouncing his last name, Solzhenitsyn, maybe. He wrote One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which is a book that I'm reading next month, and he also wrote The Gulag Archipelago. So when I see his name, I'm like, yes, I need this. So this is apparently, according to Goodreads, is the first book in a series, but it is historical fiction that he wrote. And if he wrote it, I definitely want to give it a try. It's a chunky one. It's about 700 pages. So I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to get to it, but for 90 cents, how could I say no? Also for 90 cents, a really beloved by me historical fiction author is Amy Tan, and I found The 100 Secret Senses. Never heard of this one, but I've read The Joy Luck Club by her and also The Kitchen God's Wife, and just absolutely adored them both. I really like how the aspects of history that she writes about are ones that you don't hear written about very often, and she really focuses on the generational relationships between Chinese immigrants and then their Chinese American daughters, and I just really like that about her. So I picked this one up. I also have The Bonesitter's Daughter by her as well, which I'm planning to read in November. And then I also, last time I think I went to McKay's, or the time before that, I ended up with a nonfiction work by her. So I love me some Amy Tan, and I love it even more when it's only 90 cents. Last historical fiction that I found is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I know some people who are reading this next year. Will I join in with them? I don't know, but this is a really nice hardback copy for $2.50. They had other books in the series there, but they weren't matching editions, and they were like $4 or $8. I'm like, I don't even know if I like the first one yet. So I want to read the first one and see what I think. I'm sure all of you have heard of this, but if you haven't, it's a historical fiction series following Cromwell. So really an interesting time period to read about, and one that I would like to give a try. So I'm going to try to get to it at some point, but I didn't want to buy the whole trilogy if I wasn't sure if I liked the writing at all. I'm pretty sure a few of the middle grade that I purchased have run away. I think my daughter's already snagged at least one of them. So then we have a Mango-Shaped Space by Wendy Mass. My daughter read this earlier this year. I had it out for middle grade March for, I think, disability representation of some sort for one of the prompts this year, or neurodivergent representation. I can't remember which one it was. And I didn't get to it, but my daughter did, and she loved it. And so when she saw it, she really wanted to get it. This is in like perfect brand new condition as well. So she was really excited about that one. For only 95 cents, I found the first Enola Holmes book, and I have read all of these except the very most recent one that has come out, and I thought that they were really fun, and I think that my daughter would really enjoy them. She's definitely much more in a fantasy era than she is a mystery one. She liked mysteries a ton when she was a couple years younger, and now she's much more into fantasy. But at some point, I think that she's gonna get into these and just eat them up because they are so fun. You've probably heard of them since there's been a Netflix series that has been adapted from them, but it's about Sherlock Holmes's little sister, and they're just a lot of fun. Speaking of my daughter's love for fantasy, she found a couple of books that she's really interested in. I don't know anything about them. One of them is by James Riley, who wrote The Story Thieves and Half Upon a Time, I think, or Twice Upon a Time, something like that. There's a couple series by his that she's read in their entirety and loved, and this is called The Revenge of Magic, and I don't really know what it is about, honestly, but it's the first in another series of his, and she thought it sounded interesting, so she picked up that one. And then this one is called The Nightmare Thief, and I love the cover of this so much, and it has to do with people who can influence people or change people according to their dreams, but you can't use magic on them without their permission, which is not a problem until the main character's sister is in a coma and she's convinced that she could heal her through dreams and spells and those kinds of things, but her sister can't consent because she's in a coma. So that sounded really interesting. Then pretty soon my daughter and I are going to read My Side of the Mountain. I think she's going to love it because she loves survival stories, and I do have the sequel, which is On the Far Side of the Mountain, but they had Frightful's Mountain. So I decided to get it because I think she's going to read the first one and want to read more. I also found Listening for Lions by Gloria Whelan, and I've been hearing Gloria Whelan's name a little bit here and there lately. This book, and then I think she's written another book more recently than this one, and I've been hearing her name. So I picked this one up. This is about a young girl who I think lives in Africa, and something happens to her parents and she has to go live with family. I don't know if it's like a Secret Garden kind of situation or not, where she goes and lives with relatives she doesn't really know after her parents pass away. I'm not really sure, but that's a historical fiction, as is The Golden Goblet by Eloise Jarvis McGraw. This is ancient Egyptian historical fiction, and it was 10 cents. And it's one that I have wanted to read for a while and wanted Claire to give a try as well once we get into ancient history, which I think will be next year. But I mean, if she reads it before then, that's fine too. She really likes anything that has like any sort of mythology in it. She's currently enjoying Rick Riordan's Cave Chronicles trilogy, which is Egyptian mythology. So I could really see her liking this. And then the last middle grade that I got for 15 cents is Everything on a Waffle by Polly Horvath. And I have heard of this before, and I've heard some people talking about it semi-recently, and I can't remember who they are, so if it was you, you can say so. It's a Newbery Honor book, but it's about these children, and something happens to either their babysitter, their parents are leaving out of town, and their babysitter comes down with a mild case of the bubonic plague. And so someone else comes, their aunt comes to watch them, but she's never met them before, and she's just a lot of fun, clearly. So it just sounds like a really fun, whimsical story. I just counted. There are 14 classics in this stack. So obviously this is the predominant stack. The first one I think is actually a nonfiction. It's by Mark Twain. It's called Roughing It. And I think it's like a memoir of him like traveling around the American West. It says he prospected for gold and silver, speculated on timber and mining stocks, sailed to Hawaii, and worked for a succession of small newspapers. And this is his fictionalized account of those years. Tall tales abound, as do sketches of unforgettable characters: desperados, vigilantes, newspapermen, Mormons, and prospectors. So I guess it's not entirely nonfiction, though it's rooted somewhat in fact. But I had never even heard of this Mark Twain before, and it was there. Multiple copies of it. It's one of those days where I'm like, I've never even heard of this book by this author, and I thought I owned everything or almost everything by them, and then I find out, oh, here is one of these books I've never even heard of. Here's a couple more examples of that. So I found a Thomas Hardy I've never heard of called The Well-Beloved. Don't know what this is about. It looks like it has some sailing components to it. Claire was looking at the back and she was cracking up because it says set partly in London, but mostly in Portland. And she was just like, why don't they just say that it's set mostly in Portland? So I don't really know much about it, but I love Thomas Hardy. Also, I thought I owned just about everything that George Eliot has written. And then I found Felix Holt, The Radical. I have never heard of this before. I've never heard anyone talk about it. I don't know anything about it, but I was like, what? I need this. So I picked this one up as well. Obviously, there's actually a lot of Victorian literature in this stack, which is kind of perfect for Victober coming up. I had already chosen my Victober TBR, but there's a chance that maybe I'll swap some things out. Probably not this, because it's a chunky one, but I was really excited. Plus, it's the Penguin Classic, so it will have all the notes in the back and stuff, which I love. Another Victorian classic is I got an H.G. Wells book with the weirdest cover I have ever seen. It's called The Food of the Gods. And I read the back and I'm like, I gotta read this at some point. It sounds super weird. It says it all began with the research of two scientists, Mr. Bensington and Professor Redwood, into the principles of growth in living matter. The fruit of their labors was a substance known by several names. The more academic was Heracleophobia the fourth, but their own private term was the food of the gods because of its very special properties. Their tests produced a baby chick large enough to be mistaken for a buzzard. And when the substance was consumed by rats, they grew bigger than horses. But things really began to get out of control when the food started being fed to babies. I'm so intrigued. I also found a George Gissing book. He wrote The Odd Women, which I think kind of tackles some of the new women stuff that was coming out towards the end of the Victorian era. I'd never heard of this one before though. It's called New Grub Street. And I don't really know what it's about. It's about a novelist who thought his reputation was safe, but poverty undermines his temperament and he finds it increasingly difficult to produce anything marketable. As his fortunes dwindles, his marriage founders, and the future belongs to such as Jasper Milvain, a self-seeking writer of facile reviews who has no real interest in literature as an art form, but thrives by manipulating public opinion. Sounds interesting. I was intrigued, and it was only $1.50. I think this is the last of the Victorian books. I think I might have some others in here that are Victorian time period, but not from England. So I got a couple Wilkie Collins who I love. I got Poor Miss Finch, which I have heard of and I've heard really good things about. So I'm really excited about that one. I might have to throw some Wilkie Collins in my plans for Victober because I also found Tales of Terror and of the Supernatural by Wilkie Collins. And this one's only $2. And so this is a short story collection and I for sure can squeeze a couple of these in. We've got The Dream Woman, A Terribly Strange Bed, The Dead Hand, Blow Up with the Brig, Mr. Lapel and the Housekeeper, Miss Bertha and the Yankee, Mr. Policeman and the Cook, Fauntleroy, A Stolen Letter, The Lady of Glenwith Grange, Mad Monkton, and The Biter Bit. So I feel like I'm gonna have to try to squeeze one of these in during the month of October. Okay, other classics. I found Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, and I have the yellow wallpaper by her, and I love it, and it is so good. And that is the one I have, has other stories in it, and I think this is also a short story collection. Oh, no, it's not. This is an actual kind of novella, I would say. It's a little over 100 pages long. So I think it says on the back that it's her vision of a feminist utopia. So I'm really interested to see what she thinks that looks like. I can't remember when she wrote. It doesn't say when this was originally published, but she lived from 1860 to 1935. So I'm really interested to see what this is like. I also found Washington Irving's The Sketchbook, which is a collection of different stories of his. I have a collection of some of his stories, so there may be some overlap here, but I was willing to take a chance for $1.50 because Washington Irving is one of my favorite authors of all time. I just love the way that he writes. And the last thing that I read by him, I think, was a reread of Sleepy Hollow, so I feel like I'm due to read another short story of his pretty soon. Another short story collection that I picked up is by Isaac Dinesen, and it's Anecdotes of Destiny and Erengard. I don't really know what that means, but my dear friend Dia from Novel Idea, who I've already mentioned, read the Babette's Feast by her earlier this year and said it was like one of her favorite things that she had read that month during one of our Patreon meetings. And so this has The Diver, Babette's Feast, Tempests, The Immortal Story, and The Ring. So it has a few different ones in there. Some of them are longer than others, but I am really interested in this, and I think if Dia loved it, I probably will too. I also picked up a Steinbeck. I picked up The Red Pony. I read this a couple of years ago. It's super depressing, which, I mean, it's Steinbeck. Steinbeck is often pretty depressing and bleak, but I really enjoyed reading this. And this one was 90 cents. There's a lot of 90-cent books in here, so I was really happy to find this. I also found a book by Miss Reed called Thrush Green, and I know that Kate Howe and Rainy from Rainy Day Reads and Chelsea from Voyage of a Time Wanderer and maybe some other people have been reading some of Miss Reed's books. I don't know if they've been reading Thrush Green or if they've been reading Fairacre. I think that's the other one. There's a couple series that she's done, so I don't know which one of those they've been reading, but I know that I'm pretty sure that this is the first book in one of her series. So I really wanted to pick up a first book. Sometimes I've seen random Miss Reed's books at McKay's, but oftentimes it's not a first book in a series. And I think that this one is. We'll find out. I don't know, but I'm really interested to give it a try because it sounds super cozy. And lastly, would this be a book haul from Tiffany if it didn't have some Russian literature in it, which I have already mentioned one that's historical fiction, but I have a couple others in here. And so I'm so excited about this first one because I was looking for kind of like spooky-ish stories for my in-person book club in October, and it had some sci-fi stories in there because obviously some futuristic stories can also be kind of frightening, like think 1984. This book inspired 1984 and other kind of dystopian literature of the sort, and that is We by Evgeny Zamyatin. Might be mispronouncing that, sorry. But this is kind of like a lot of the inspiration for 1984 is part of this book. So I was really excited because I had heard about this and immediately put it on my Amazon wish list and then found it at McKay's a couple of days later for also 90 cents. There's a lot of 90-cent books in here. So that was super exciting. I can't wait to get to this one. I don't think it's super long. It's under 200 pages. So yes, I am loving diving a little bit more into sci-fi lately, but I've always really enjoyed dystopian sci-fi. And last but not least, the book that I spent the most amount of money on, and that's okay. I was so excited that I found this. The nose, look at the cover by Nikolai Gogol and Other Stories. It's not only the nose, but I loved this edition. I haven't heard of this translator, so hopefully that doesn't end up being an issue for me. It's by Suzanne Fuso, and so it has more than one short story in it. It doesn't just have the nose. It also has The Lost Letter, The Portrait, 1835 version, Nevsky Avenue, Diary of a Madman, The Carriage, Rome, and The Overcoat. So it has quite a few of his short stories in there. I haven't read any Gogol yet. I do own Dead Souls and want to get to that soon-ish, but I couldn't pass this up. It's in like brand new condition and I was so excited because it's very rare for me to find Gogol at a used bookstore. Well, that's my haul. I hope you have enjoyed this. Please let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these. Are there any that you are intrigued by that you'd like to see me prioritize? Because when I have this many wonderful books, plus so many books behind me, it's very difficult to figure out which ones I should read first. So I would love to hear from you if there are ones that you think that I would enjoy more or ones that sound really intriguing to you. Please let me know. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.